How you doing, Stash? Coming at you with another YouTube. My thesis, my premise, if you will, on this one is why are Polish people, in particular the men, so angry? Or maybe portrayed that way sometimes, like Clint Eastwood, Gran Torino. I think he was a Polish-American veteran. Or Walter Sobchak in The Big Lebowski, whose buddies died face down in the mud in Nam. I mean, a lot of guys aren't. They just kind of accept the way things are, change their name, assimilate, run away. That's understandable. Of course, part of the reason is World War II experience. In the Yalta Conference, if you read up on that, the big three, Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt, the Poles were cut out. They were betrayed. A lot of them will say we were betrayed at Yalta. Okay, so that's pretty huge. The other thing being the entire World War II experience, they were attacked by the Soviets, Russians, and the German Nazi fascists from both sides. And there were treaties that weren't lived up to. And so the Poles were left out to dry. I don't agree with some of the. Pat Buchanan's an interesting writer, but I think he practically somewhat in his World War II book. I'll leave the name in the liner notes. It is interesting and worth checking out, but he sort of kind of rests the whole thing on the back of Poland. And some British people are like, well, we lived up to the treaty eventually, or whatnot, or you could say that gave Great Britain an excuse to get into the war and whatnot, but they were the largest exile force in the war, and are really, until relatively recently, and even now, not given any recognition for their contribution. It's all down to the Poles attacked German armor with cavalry. Cavalry was a part of World War II. If you go by that propaganda, you don't know anything, and that's not quite the way it went down. Okay, they actually took out a lot of German equipment and fought a lot harder against Germany than U.S. history textbooks will tell you about the war. The war in the States, to the best of my knowledge, is an emotional, sentimental thing with a lot of people, and it's very, very Hollywood. I mean, Tom Hanks, Saving Private Ryan, and Pearl Harbor, Ben Affleck. I mean, as I've said in a lot of these YouTube blogs, I mean, Russia did the bulk of the fighting in the war, and it was on their soil. There's a big difference, when you send your troops off, it's to fight in foreign lands. It's those guys, God bless them, they give their lives, but it's adventurism in a certain way. They're going to fight another land. When it's on your soil, like it happened here in the United States, the Civil War, then casualties are incredible. In particular, in addition on the civilian side, and also the Katyn Forest Massacre, which, if you read it, communists to this day don't even want to admit that, Noam Chomsky even is an interesting guy. I'm not going to pick a fight with the guy or whatever, but he dismisses a lot of the big black book of communism. I think a lot of that's all underdone. I don't think people in the United States ever understood that. In fact, it all came down to, Hollywood was, angry about it because they were accused of being communist sympathizers, and they're like Red Scare and this and that. I mean, they didn't lose their lives in the gulags, bottom line, okay? I mean, what can I say? Is there some different forms of communism, socialism? Is it all bad? No, that's a different point. What happened was people died in China and Russia in unthinkable numbers. Okay, and per capita, in a certain way, Poland is even kind of worse because of their size relative to those other countries. But the loss of life in Poland and China and Russia seems to be, in the American mind, maybe the British mind, European mind, kind of diminished compared to other types of horrible atrocities. Or, some people have to, like the Armenian people, have to kind of fight to get the word out on theirs. So that's why, people, the American government didn't like seeing big, burly Polish American veterans go in the Capitol going, "What about the cotton, man? What about the cotton? What about cotton first?" And it was, deeply suppressed. Andrzej Wajda has a wonderful movie on it that you can't miss. Katyn, Katyn. Andrzej Wajda. He's a wonderful director. I think he lost some family members in Katyn. And he talks in interviews on how he couldn't do a movie about that. His probably his most famous Polish film, and Polish cinema is very good. Give it a chance if you can. Ashes and Diamonds is probably his top movie. Okay, so Yalta, they felt betrayed. Katyn farce, total genocide, ignored. Polish contribution to World War II, ignored. Polish-American war heroes. Grabowski, Gabby Francis Grabowski, the greatest pilot in the UTO, European Theater of Operations, pretty much relatively ignored, except for flight enthusiasts, although I have to be thankful, I believe he got an airport out of it. But as I said in one of my other blogs, no postage stamp, no movie. There's a new movie coming out about 303 Squadron sometime this year that I mentioned a couple of times. Don't miss that. Don't let my criticism of these political things hold you back in checking out Polish history, because history will be repeated again. Which is why I'm not in favor of it's up to them what to do, but I'm not in favor personally. I don't think it's a good idea that Poland should be part of the EU. Yeah. Not EU talk. I think they voted overwhelmingly talk. EU, yeah, man. And get that missile defense system out of there. Trade food with Russia. You can't afford that. That's my opinion. And the monument in New Jersey going away or having trouble with it. And there was another one over in Boston, the partisan statue that was moved out. I don't know if it's the same great sculptor who did the crazy horse for the American Indians, and he did another one of General Anders. His name escapes me. I'll leave it in the liner notes. These things just aren't discussed. There's not going to be a Saving Private Kowalski. Okay? There's not going to be... there's really never been... I mean, there hasn't been in English a portrayal of what people went through in the Kursk battle. There is a German version of what happened in Stalingrad, the horror. Nothing compares to that stuff. And I recognize the Slav versus Slav thing is a problem, and it's a tragedy that, and I hope that Poles and Russians could start getting along better instead of, getting on the road to reliving, World War II. Being part of, try to be your own country and not be a pawn of NATO and pretend that you're not. And I don't know if there's anything Poland can do about that. Maybe they have to be. Maybe the United States doesn't leave them any say in that matter. Maybe the rest of NATO doesn't. I was liking what Trump was saying early on as a candidate and things about thinking about reducing or getting out of NATO, but you can see the resistance on that. And Gran Torino. I mean, so given this, he's a Polish veteran, and that's the kind of thing he's facing. And I guess it's a movie that's basically a lesson about that everybody should be accepted. I understand that, but the other point of view's got to be taken into consideration. I mean, Poland and Hungary right now are unpopular in Economist magazine and New York Times and Washington Post and other huge, powerful news outlets, and probably by the Pentagon and intelligence services of the West, and the EU are enemies of Poland now. If I could back up, what I was talking about was because Poland and Hungary have made a stand on the migration issues, touchy topic in Europe. But I mean, unless are all the videos fake of what's going on in Sweden, the streets of Paris, some places in Germany, Italy, the man in the street in and around Europe is seeing the Poles and the Hungarians as kind of silent heroes, and some of the Trump supporters are too. Does it help to ruin Europe? Is it going to save sub-Saharan Africa? Is it always so racist to be for borders? Because I'll say this, that is never talked about. The U.S. Imperium, if you will, defense establishment has wonderful, bold things about it. Yeah, sure, diversity and a lot of stuff can be good for people. Get in there and fight as one for America, but it's got dark side too. In particular in Africa was my point. Not everybody's that happy about what went down in Libya. Funding, radical extremists against Gaddafi, for instance, and his public execution and things like that, when they had is not really honorable. They had to deal with Musa Kusa, Mr. Gaddafi's intelligence guy and tenant, and to give up his weapons of mass destruction. And this has been something that's been noticed by the international community. But my point, a long-winded point, is in Africa, instead of a bunch of colorful talk about helping Africa and accusing people of being bad for protecting their borders, China, mighty China, has gone into Africa, and they're putting jobs up there. Okay, they have a foothold, working. They're offering some jobs, not drones, not propping up dictators, not running around with special forces guys who speak multiple languages with laptops, who know karate and crap like that, going around and those guys. And I think Trump, there's a lot of left people who are saying he's just as bad as Obama and Bush on a lot of these things. I simply don't think he is. I think the Saudi problem with Yemen still stands, and that could be a mark of the president. But he hasn't opened up a new theater of warfare. He's tried to get out of Syria, and and now it looks like they're trying to work a peace deal with North Korea. How does this all attach to Poland? Everything does. Everything is connected. There's nothing wrong with border sovereignty. With the sin, if you will, is warfare and toppling governments. Soros and others produce color revolutions. They're causing trouble. I believe in people of nations. I believe in the people of different nations, that they can do things for themselves, and that they don't need to be freed by democracy necessarily. And a lot of those NGOs and whatever are malevolent, and that goes for Poland and being sucked up into EU and NATO and all types of agreements that bind them, when they should just be growing real food and selling it to China. Keep the dragon happy. Keep the bear happy. So the American men and women or whatever are the butt of jokes, and that it's I think there's honestly been improvement in that with young people. That's old school kind of stuff. But I mean, Rob Reiner, who worked on All in the Family under the guise of helping. I think I've been personally offended. Many people have, call you a meathead or whatever, or in some cases, sometimes maybe it's justified for me. Just kidding, but maybe not either. I mean, and he's now has some kind of committee that he's working on with Clapper and Brennan of the intelligence services. That to go after the Russians and this and that. I mean, that's not going to go away, and I don't think anything I'm saying is going to register with anybody on the left or who was in part of the DNC or even a certain amount of the Republicans. It's just polarized now, and in particular cultures, like if you choose to be Polish, or I call Polish American, as a separate entity, you're in for a lonely time. You're not going to get much support, that's why go on my other ones and contact the post office if you're Polish American. See what you can do about getting Gabreski a postage stamp, because it's all does that. And tell me about your culture, if you have one that's been kind of suppressed. So enemies of powerful people, Poland and Hungary, and that's why you see a lot of angry Polish guys. Gran Torino never really getting a fair shot, actually, in some aspects. Again, in each of these videos, I'll always be talking about the very important insult and tragedy that the Polish fighters, veterans, and workers in World War II weren't permitted to march on Victory Day. I remember Peter Jennings. I saw a clip of an old thing. Peter Jennings, they were saying, well, Poles weren't allowed to march, and he was like, well, what did the Poles do? What are they doing now? They were one of the only loyal countries to the United States when the war on terror under Bush wasn't at times all that popular, not really liked by the world. He was a black sheep for a while, and Poland was loyal in the coalition to fight terror, and unconditionally loyal. And I would say that the American popular culture is incredibly popular. It overrides history and reality, and in it, often more than not, Poland doesn't look good. So thus you get an angry guy. If you want to identify as Polish, you get an angry action. What about Katyn? What about Yalta? And nobody cares. But you should care if you are. And I think some of Europe is growing to respect Poland and Hungary for their stand. Others aren't. I mean, if you want to go with Merkel, who was a Stasi person, rumored to be, or I think she probably was, or Muta. They call her Muta because she's mean or something behind the scenes. I don't think it's a very nice thing to do, but when she met Vladimir Putin, he brought out a big dog. Big, nice, beautiful, friendly dog, because he probably heard that she didn't like dogs or something. Well, she doesn't. Some would say she's great and she's a liberating force of the future, and we got to embrace this technocratic world and no borders, and just open it all up. If you don't, you're mean. What about what China's doing, putting guys to work and do some sensible things? Not just accusing people of always evil, malevolent. Oh, you want your borders. A nativist. Everybody's a nativist or a nationalist or a popularist. It's so evil, evil, evil. And I never get replies on these videos. So if you're some liberal guy, let me know why and Trump, okay, a lot of people saying, well, he's just as evil. Well, he ended the funding for the quote-unquote moderate forces in Syria. So you got to give him that. And he did make a great speech on Poland. On my up-and-coming vlog, I'm going to be talking about more difficult issues regarding Poland and Trump. Some are seeing him already as a letting Poland down and so forth. That's another thing. But this is a primer on why the Polish guys are so angry. Gran Torino. Why is Walt Solchek so pissed? Why does he not even want to identify as Polish? You know, is there really any Polish people, that many left, as they say, in the country? Certainly, the removing these historical statues is a slippery slope to go on it, because who decides what is good or not? I know there's still countless statues around the country with the Spanish-American War. I haven't complained about those. I think we went down and attacked them. Remember the the Cajun Furs happened, and America didn't look into it, and there's a lot of things like that, you know. History is not pretty. All right, somebody let me know what you think, or can you hear me? What do you think about this stuff? I mean, doesn't anybody talk about anything? All right. All right, so get angry, you Polish men and women. All right. Dzień dobry. Take care, everyone.